For somebody who's listening to this podcast today, what would you want them to take away from your story?
For any person who does want to travel and who wants to do it solo and have been waiting on people to go with, I was that person probably 3 or 4 years ago, and I finally get to a point where I turned 30, so quarter life crisis, right?
Congratulations.
And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna have a bigger regret not doing this now. Like, while I have no family, like no kids. Not saying that should hold you back. I know a lot of families that travel. So I just did it. That regret alone, like knowing that would be a regret later, was big enough for me to just say, okay, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna travel. I'm gonna do it.
Yes.
Let's just do it.
This is why we're here. Welcome to another episode of Everyday Badassery, in which we are telling travel stories from the field to help you be more inspired to live a little bit more of a badass life. It doesn't have to be about those huge moments. Sometimes it's just that 1% more badass. Super excited about today's guest, who I think is a total badass. Katie Wine traveled through Mexico for, is it a year?
Like 5 months, 6 months, 5, 6 months. Yeah.
She's sitting right behind me. She's also holding the camera.
Yep.
We're going to dig into her story and understand some of the things that may have been a challenge for her along the way and her badass story. Let's dive in. This meeting is a long time in the making.
Yes.
I have been trying to meet you for a very long time. So actually, I learned something new today, and we're traveling right now in Ocean Beach, San Diego, and it's a beautiful evening. We're about to drone the sunset. And I just learned that when I first met you, you were in Guatemala, and this was at the beginning of the pandemic.
Right.
Where did you go right after Guatemala, and then how did you choose Mexico?
Once the pandemic hit, when I was in Guatemala, it was like a crazy, ridiculous 5-6 day journey to get back home, and then I just stayed put in Colorado.
Yep.
And I took on a nanny job, and then, got to a point where I was like, you know what? I feel confident to try and do this again, try and start my Central America trip, and went back to Mexico. And I didn't intend to stay in Mexico that whole time. I intended to kind of go a similar route and go back down to Guatemala and, all the other countries in Central America. But I started really enjoying it in Mexico.
Actually, so that's a really important thing, because she went into this trip with an original intention that ended up not being the trip that you took in the end.
Right.
So walk me through that. Like, you went to Mexico, and at what point in your journey were you like, I really like this, I'm going to stay here? And were you okay with that choice by the time you left, the 5 or 6 months later?
Definitely was okay with it. It is now my #1 country I would tell anyone to visit.
Oh, wow.
Which I never would thought it would be.
Okay.
Because I know I shouldn't have probably felt this way in the beginning, but growing up in Indiana, an idea of traveling for most people that I knew in Indiana was you take a trip to Florida for spring break, right? Or if you do go international, it's Mexico. So Mexico kind of just had this bad connotation to it.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't really getting outside. It wasn't really exploring, in my eyes, like, other countries in a big way. And so I kind of just put Mexico as like, I'll hit up Mexico, but it's probably not going to be a place where I want to stay. So maybe my expectations were really low. And I got there, I got to Tulum, met some really great people, had conversations, exchanged stories, and they started talking about different spots in Mexico they've been to, like Palenque and San Cristobal. I was like, these do feel like my kind of style, my kind of vibe of where I'd like to go. And you meet some people when you're in hostels, and you just kind of go with the flow, and you're like, all right, you're going to go to this town? I'm going to come with you. That sounds like a great time. Like, I want to check it out too. And
hold on. There's something really important that you're saying here that I think is a mindset of a true traveler, which is, even though you may have had like pre-perceptions about Mexico before going,
right,
you still went there with an open mind.
Yeah.
And while you were there, even though she may have had an end goal of getting to Central South America, you decided to be open to the idea of staying there. And not only that, you went with the flow. It wasn't like you heard these stories from other people and you're like, nah, I don't know, and you kind of doubted it.
Mm-hmm.
You were open to listening, and then you tried new places within Mexico, right?
Mm-hmm.
Actually, how many different places did you go to within Mexico?
I have no idea. A lot. I don't know. I mean, I started down in Tulum. I went up to Holbox, and then, eventually I made my way all the way up to Mexico City.
Right.
So I stopped at a lot of places along the way. I couldn't tell
And
you the number
basically,
right now.
every single place she traveled to, I went there right after you went and always missed you. And so now that we are both randomly in San Diego, in Ocean Beach, now I finally get to meet you.
Yes.
So one other thing, you were talking about Indiana in there, which, and this is just a perception from me, is my guess is, given they think, Mexico is the exotic destination and Florida is the normal vacation, my guess is they are of a more conservative mindset. Is that a true statement?
So.
This is just
not
within,
all, but
right, just within your
Right.
your circle of people who you're interacting with. When you decided to embark on this multi-month trip in Mexico, what were some of the things that your network within Indiana or your network within your family and friends in the States, like what were they saying to you? Were they, for example, were they supportive?
I mean, I've always kind of been the oddball. They tolerate me, like my mom tolerates me. But, when I told them I was going to Mexico, there was a lot of, well, Mexico's dangerous. Like, there's cartel there and you need to be really, really careful. And I'm not going to lie, I let that get to my mind a little bit. So when I flew there, I felt like I was more on edge in some ways when I was in Mexico City and Tulum. And, I kind of started letting my guard down after a while because I don't think people realize how the locals in Mexico, people in Mexico are so friendly. Like they really, really, really are. And I think, being back at home, you hear what people, your friends, your family say to you, you hear what the news says, and you develop this idea about what this place is.
Yep.
And I think that's why I love Mexico even more, because it is so much better than what I think a lot of people had a similar mindset before I went. Like, I thought Mexico was going to be really dangerous, which I'm not saying there aren't parts that are, but it has way more to offer than you'll ever imagine. And I think people should give it a chance, for sure.
I think that goes back to this theme that we were hearing earlier, which is being open to the idea that it might not be what you expected, and it might not be what everyone is saying it's going to be.
And that was the little voice in the back of my head too when I was going there. I was like, it can't be like what I'm imagining. And a little story. When I was a kid, this is another reason why I had this kind of mindset, that preconceived mindset that Mexico was bad a little bit, which it's not. But when I was a kid, we walked over the border to Mexico, and my only experience and like schema for what Mexico is like was right when I walked over the border, and it was a pretty, rough area, and I saw this grandmother holding a baby, begging for water, and I remember seeing these two kids sleeping on a cardboard box, like on the side of the street. So I also had that kind of in the back of my head, but I knew, I was like, this can't be all that Mexico like is. Like, there's got to be more to it than what I'm just seeing right now. And I don't want to not go explore this country and just knock it off because of something that
it's
I
a
don't know.
singular
I'm trying
experience.
to think about it. Yeah,
it's a singular experience.
Yes, it's a
and
singular experience.
I understand that Mexico is a super teeny tiny country. It's not. It's freaking
It's
humongous.
huge.
And just like with anything, right? Even sometimes, like when you meet someone for the first time, you might not have gotten who that person is from that one instance, but yet you didn't knock them from that one interaction. Yeah. And I think that's important, because it's, a lot of people are like, oh no, I hate that place because I had that one bad experience. But it's like, yes, you may have that, but that doesn't count for the whole country.
Right.
Like, there's a lot of other places and a lot of other experiences, and you're You're only holding yourself back from experiencing something that could potentially be amazing by just giving a blanket statement to the whole thing. Actually, here's a side question. As you look back on your time in Mexico, and how long were you there for?
Like, I think just a little over 5 months. Yeah.
Is there like a single moment or a couple moments that stand out in your mind as being a like, this is why I'm here?
Ooh.
What's the first one that comes to mind when I ask that question?
I think Palenque. Palenque is like this, it's a small town surrounded by jungle. And at the time, it was more of just like a stepping stone to get to the next town. I didn't really expect to get much out of it, just like when I initially went to Mexico, I guess. And I think it was like the perfect little break that I needed from the craziness that was going on in Tulum and Holbox. And then before I ended up being in San Cristobal and Puerto Escondido. And I remember being I can't remember the place I stayed, but just at the hostel, and I was just chilling there, and we stayed in these little huts, and at night you can hear the howler monkeys, and it was just like, it was so cool. And then we hitchhiked, me and 2 other girls, to a waterfall and just relaxed and chilled there all day. It was just like a nice, relaxing, it was just what I needed. It was great.
It sounds like something you can just do in Indiana, right?
yeah, exactly. Jungle and everything.
I love that. It's that experience where you're just so in it. Actually, hold on. You said something in there. Let's dive into this for a second. So you said that you hitchhiked somewhere.
Yeah.
I would say in this day and age, let's say I were to get out of this car in San Diego right now and hitchhike, I would say the majority of people would think that I'm a goner thereafter.
Yeah. I got a lot of hate for that.
Let's talk about that. What kind of hate do you get about hitchhiking? And how does that, like, what do you do with that?
They come from a place most of the time where they're just caring, like they want to make sure you're being safe. But I also know, after being in Tulum, because I hitchhiked there too, after talking to a lot of travelers, I wouldn't do it if I had known, like, if I hadn't heard of anyone else doing it. And it's a very common thing to do. In the places that I did it, it was very common to do. Like, when I did it in Tulum, a lot of the travelers talked about how they hitchhiked from the beach back to the hostel in town in Tulum. And we heard the same thing in Palenque from there to the waterfall. So if it's something that I know is like common and I've heard of other travelers doing it, then I feel a lot more comfortable doing it. Plus I was with a couple other girls. Yeah. I'm
hearing a few things in here which I think are really important. One is, and when we're referencing this hate that Katie's getting, we're referring to you sharing things in your Instagram stories and followers, friends, and family responding back, not necessarily in a go Katie kind of way, right? They're responding with concern. And we heard this in Stacy's podcast as well, which is the people who are looking out for you aren't necessarily saying like, like don't do that, you're not allowed, but they're simply based on what they know and what they have experienced.
Right.
With what they know about hitchhiking in Indiana, for example, that it might not be the safest thing.
Right.
And so it's not like they're out to get you to stop you, but they're just looking out for you in a loving way that as the person who's out there doing it on your own might feel like you second guess yourself. Yeah. But the important part of your story is 2 things. One, you did it anyway, regardless. But the second part is you didn't just do it. You were still utilizing the information that you knew around you based off of what was common culture, what other people were doing and their experiences with it. And then you were making a decision that was the right one for you and not the right one based off of what other people are expecting out of you. In my opinion, that's badass. Because on a normal day, jumping into some random person's car could be potentially really scary. The last time I hitchhiked, I had a flat tire in Guatemala. I was at Lake Tikal, is that right? No,
Yeah.
Lake Atitlan.
Yes.
I was at Lake
okay.
Atitlan. I was
Yeah.
nowhere near where I started from on this
Mm-hmm.
bike ride. Flat tire. Obviously, there's no bike shop. There's no bike shops.
Yeah.
And so I
imagine.
I hitchhiked, and they're like, get in the back of the truck. And when I go to take the tarp, like move the tarp to get in, there were like 30 people in this truck. And I'm like, okay. And 30 sets of hands reached out, grabbed my bike, car's still moving, grabbed me. There's room for my bike. It's on everyone's lap.
Mm-hmm.
And I am hanging off of the back, holding on to the side of the truck, having the time of my life. Having the time of my life. Those types of, like, when you're hitchhiking like that, feel free, don't you?
Yes, for sure.
And like that's why you're here. Like this is the experience that you're looking for.
That. I love that for you.
Right?
I love hearing that.
Oh, it's amazing. Oh, it feels so good.
Yeah.
Wind in your air, wind in your air, wind in your hair, and just that feeling of freedom is you can't beat that. Okay, last question for you. So we've heard a lot. Would you consider yourself a badass? Why or why not?
Just because you called me a badass, I'll consider myself a badass. Okay, I don't know. That's a hard question. Like, because I don't want to, like, you know, like, what's the word I'm looking for?
Have a big inflated ego?
Yeah, exactly. But, I mean, I think I'm more like other people than they realize, and it is hard to put yourself out there like that.
Yeah.
And they're more capable of being a badass and doing the same thing too than they realize.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, you know what? Why not? I'm a badass.
You know what? Let me tell you why you're a badass and why I think you might not think you're a badass.
Okay.
So the reason why I think Katie is a badass is because regardless of what other people say, you went out there and you rocked Mexico for a long time. Mm-hmm. Often solo and just kind of flying by the seat of your pants wherever the wind took you. Mm-hmm. Not wind in your air.
I knew what you meant. They knew what you meant probably too. So,
but that might not feel badass to you because you were with so many other people who were likely doing the same thing. Mm-hmm. And so relative to the people you were surrounding yourself by, you might not feel that badass because you've seen it done time and time again, potentially with other travelers who did it for twice the amount of time, or maybe hitchhiked 2 more times a day than you did, or something like that. And so badassery can often feel relative.
Yeah.
And so the question I have for all of you listening is strip away what you're used to seeing every single day. Ask yourself within something amazeballs that you have accomplished or did that day, big or small. Mm-hmm. Could it be badass regardless of what everyone else is doing? You are badass.
Well, thank you.
Thank you
too.
Thank you for doing this with me.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, let's hug. It's going to be terrible for the microphones. And Katie, where can we find you?
Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Katie_wine.
And
YouTube.
All of that, stop.
Sorry.
All of that will be in the show notes below, so make sure you check out Katie. Go forth, be a badass. If you enjoyed this episode, tell us in the feedback section below, and we appreciate it, and we'll see y'all in the next adventure. Ciao.
Bye.